All right, I don't know if you've been following this, but in just a few minutes, a fascinating case that could have Facebook getting a little nervous. It started with one user in Austria, and it's starting to cause a bit of a contagion worldwide. Maybe a big problem for Facebook. Nobody knows about it. We'll tell you all about it. Meanwhile, there's a new poll out today, this one from the Wall Street Journal, also in conjunction with NBC, but I prefer not to mention NBC. It shows that 3 out of 4 of us believe our kids are actually going to be worse off. And I'm telling you, if my kids are watching, you're not getting a dime, kids. So you will be worse off. They blame a lot of this economic angst on politicians. They say that their inability to act on things and inspire confidence is why they have so little confidence in the country's future. Back with Scott, back with Mark, back with Cheryl. I'm not surprised by any of this, Cheryl.
I wasn't surprised by any of it at all, but I was also surprised to see that in that same poll they blame Republicans more than Democrats in Congress. I think there's plenty of blame in Washington to go around. But I think what is so sad about this is to say that your children aren't going to have any better of an existence than you will. Look at what's happening to these kids, these millennials. We talked about it. They're sitting on student loan debt. They can't get good paying jobs if they can get a job. And so that entire generation has kind of a bleak outlook. I think that's bleeding upwards to the parents who are absorbing their children's, in some cases,
but I think
depression.
it builds character for them. The less they get, probably the better.
You're tough, Dad.
Mark, what do you think?
This shows that the people are sick and tired of being sick and tired. People think that we're on the wrong track because we are. And it's regular working Americans who feel the consequences of it. They're underemployed, they're undercompensated, and they're very underwhelmed by the economic policies out of Washington, D.C. And it's devastating. These are amazing numbers of disapproval of what's happening in Washington right now. And people are concerned about the generational future. When they turn their TV on at night, they want to be inspired to believe that hope is just over the horizon. But instead, they turn it on and the commander-in-chief is once again singing another rendition of the blame game. And they don't feel that sense of hope. The president, even though everybody in Washington maybe is to blame, the president of the United States is the one they identify with, and they want him to inspire them.
It makes you wonder what the midterms are going to look like. I'm really wondering what the midterm elections are going to look like, because there's a big shift in attitude in this poll, I have to say.
There is a lot of that blame game, and that's, I think, what Mark touched on. Scott, is something I want to pick up with you. I remember there was one weekend we were doing live programming. I think it was after Sandy, the Hurricane Sandy. And there was a lot of blame going back and forth. And it was on another weekend, I believe it was on the budget brink, and the government was going to shut down. We did a little experiment that every time a press conference started with one side blaming the other, we'd stop the press conference. So John Boehner would come along and say, if not for the president blocking us at every step, we stop the press conference. President would come on the air, Republicans are stopping me, stop the press conference. So in other words, if you give them the oxygen to just rant and blame the other guy, then they'll take it and run with it. But we chose not to that weekend go to the microphone when they did. But we see that behavior when we just keep going to that behavior. And I think that what feeds this cynicism, because people just see everyone pointing at the other.
I think it basically propagates a lot of inertia, Neil. But, the other thing is, too, guys, is it really the government's fault that people aren't saving? I mean, that's really, I think, the end-all, be-all question here. According to the Employee Benefits Research Institute, 46% of Americans have less than $10,000 saved in retirement. So, the dollar doesn't fall far from the tree in this sense with regards to how they feel about their kids, because they're not saving money either. And also, half of American workers don't have employee benefit plans, like 401ks offered to them, to save money. And the government actually, it's not a great plan, but it was a start. Remember, President Obama came out with the MyRA, which is basically a way to significantly fund our own deficit spending. Was a start, but not a great one, but at least something they were trying to do to get that out there, to get people in the mode of saving, because we just aren't doing it as a country.
Well, but I think what is so interesting about it, and every time we talk about one of these new polls, whether it's from NBC or whoever, is that it's interesting to see that people will say one thing when they're surveyed, but I'll be darned if they're not going to go vote in November and vote the same stupid way they've been voting for years and years.
Or continue their own.
Oh, I like her.
Or continue their own pattern of behavior.
Or like to Scott's point, maybe not saving money. And to be fair, look, we have had a rough few years. Obviously, a lot of us are still trying to recover in this country from the recession. But at the same time, how you speak at a poll and what you do at the polls are just so different. So a little bit of a grain of salt, I think.
I just wonder, maybe depending on the period that you are. I mean, if you were the products of the Depression, as my parents were, they probably figured, well, it couldn't get much worse than we went through, so there's hope for you. My dad used to joke, Neil, I provide a very low bar for you. But in a joking way, what he was saying was, we've been through a lot worse. We can always climb out of this.
Sure.
That is what seems to be gone.
Sure. It seems like we've gone from the greatest generation to the whiniest generation,
Right.
in that period
Speak
of time.
for yourself.
Okay. And so, but it is this sick and tired of being sick and tired. It's taken 6 years, and there's just no sense of hope. There's no sense of optimism. Unfortunately, they do act that way in the polls. But what we need is some leadership, someone who's going to stand out to say, you know what, America's days,
It always
are
happens.
better.
Our history shows that at the right moment, someone emerges.
Our best
I don't
days
know.
lie ahead.
All right. Now, if you kids are watching at home, and of course you are, I'm talking to all three of you right now. Your mother and I are spending everything.